Hello and welcome to today's Mooc from Tricentis. Today we are going to look on how to use the test planning session in Tricentis Tosca. My name is Federico Tassinari and I'm a training consultant here at Tricentis. Today I'm joined by Peter Spitzer. He is the product manager here at Tricentis. Peter, well, we can consider him the expert when it comes to test planning here at Tricentis. Before we start, let me just go quickly through the housekeeping rules. I want to apologize for all those people who have seen this many times, but we need to go through this. Remember that there is a question box. You can ask your questions there because you will be muted, as there are many people who are joining us, and we want to avoid all people talking at the same time. If you want to see past Moocs recordings and you want information on our scheduled Mooc for the future, just visit our website. Today we will go and follow our usual format. Peter will go through some concept and then he will proceed on demonstrate those concepts, and we also add some new functionalities. He will showcase something. At the end we will have our Q&A session. And we will try to answer as many questions as possible, but I want to apologize in advance if we will not make through all of them, because they're usually a lot. And now I just leave you to the interesting bit with Peter.
Thanks, Federico, for the introduction, and welcome everyone to today's Mooc. The Mooc is all about leveraging the power of test planning. So the basic idea of today's Mooc is that in the first hand we're going to have some introduction. How did the topic of test planning evolve over time? Then we're going to go into the details and facts of test planning within Tosca, where I would like to give you some details on the different objects you can create within the test planning component, and that you also get an idea of how we name them so that we know what we are talking about. And then we're gonna directly jump into the hands-on session, and I will demonstrate you the power of test planning within our product. And in the end, obviously, there's gonna be a Q&A session where we're gonna go through some of the questions you raised during the Mooc. So before we can start digging into the topic, I would like to give you a short introduction so that you get an idea of why and how we get where we are currently are. Back in the days, test planning was kind of a tedious job. It seemed to be done by experts who did some magic, and then they went through their entire processes, which were like super complex, and you weren't able to find anyone in the company who was able to explain you the entire process. Some of you might know or might remember the times when you did your test planning within Excel spreadsheets and they were flowing all around on your network drives or even in the cloud. And as a test manager, you were not 100% certain or sure if you now updated the correct file, or if it's like an older version of the file that you just updated, or was I supposed to update an additional file? And that process even got more complex when you had like interconnections between those Excel spreadsheets, and where then some data of the first Excel spreadsheet got propagated to the second and the eighth file, and it was just a mess, to be honest. So the old ways, the ways how we did test planning, they do not work in our agile environments, in those fast-changing, fast-paced environments that we are working in. So we at Tricentis, we thought about the topic and came up with some kind of reinventing the possibility of doing your test planning. So what's test planning today, and how did we get there? There are many tracks. Some of them might be straightforward, some of them have more curves, but there are many ways that you can reach a proper test planning as well, which would then result in some proper and quality assured product. There are three, or from our perspective, there are three methodologies you can follow. So these could be those different tracks, for example. It's either Agile, Kanban, for example, or Waterfall. When we're talking about Agile, that's an iterative approach. It works with sprints. where after each sprint you want to be able to have a releasable product increment that you can potentially ship to a customer, and that would either solve a problem on the customer side or generate some value on their side. And it's based on either user stories or epics or even themes. Compared to Kanban, which is where the iterations are optional, so you're not forced to use those iterations, like sprints, for example. You rather work in swim lanes, where the different streams in those swim lanes have like their work in progress limits and everything. But there are to no extent any estimations, nor is there any commitment by a certain team to deliverable after one of those iterations. And waterfall, that's like back in the old days where you have no sprints, there are no iterations at all, where you have those different silos between development and test, and which is basically specification-based testing. So you have your specification of the entire product up front. You start developing, and after development is finished, you hand the entire product over to the test department, which is in the first glance super overwhelmed by the sheer complexity of the product, and then you incrementally try to come to some quality assurance within your product. What we typically see, especially in bigger enterprises, that they tend to move towards agile development. Sometimes they take the step in between from waterfall to agile by doing also some Kanban projects. But what we typically see is that within especially larger companies, you have mixtures within the development department. So that means that it's not a clear stream of only agile teams or only Kanban teams, rather than a mixture of some teams are still working in waterfall because there might be some also legal restrictions they have to apply to, and there are some agile teams and some teams that work with Kanban, which can make it sometimes pretty hard to get to a streamlined process of doing your test planning. But the good part is that no matter which kind of approach you use, the Tosca test planning component is capable of delivering value to no matter what kind of approach you take within your development department. So what does test planning per se mean to us as a company? What does it mean to me personally? Within the Tosca test suite, you have lots of different test management capabilities, which means you can do test case design, you can work on your requirements and track all your requirements within the product and weight them there. You have your test case specification, you can execute and automate your test cases, you can do continuous integration tests, you can schedule your tests and everything. These are all different test activities, which to some extent contribute to test management. So test management is the sum of all those different activities you can do within the Tosca test suite. But from our point of view, there was a crucial part missing, which allowed you to plan those activities, which with the new test planning component, you're able to do that now. So what does the test planning component allow you to do? It allows you to plan all these test activities that you were already able to do and to execute within Tosca, either by resources or by time. So what is test planning and what's the session, a test planning session? It allows you to plan your tests within a certain time box that's predefined or that's defined by you. It's independent of the approach, as I've mentioned before. So no matter if you use waterfall, Kanban, or agile, you can use that approach. You not can only plan the activities within Tosca in the test planning component, but also activities that you have to do either before or even after you enter the universe of the Tosca test suite, which means that if before you can start working on creating your test cases, you can even plan within Tosca to set up your environment or do some knowledge transfer from the developers to the testers. Or after you did all your exercises within Tosca, you can also like plan the release party, for example, or send out the final report to C-level. What are the benefits when using the test planning component? First of all, it's fully integrated into Tosca, so you can plan, execute, and report all your testing activities within one tool. It allows you to evolve from the simple execution management to a process management, which is the point that I just referred before, so that you get this full coverage and you not can only plan your execution within the test planning component, rather than also activities you have to do before and after you're executing. You always stay on top of your activities, as you always get a detailed overview of your entire testing process you planned within the test planning component. And from my point of view, one of the biggest benefits is that it doesn't come with any additional costs. So as long as you have any valid Tosca license, no matter which Tosca edition you bought, you can use the test planning component. And that's just to name a few of them. There are way more benefits. So let's jump into the test planning component itself. There are different objects you can create, and just that you know what I'm talking about while doing then the demonstration, I would like to clarify those definitions. There are test planning folders. These folders can be created anywhere within your repository, either directly under the root node of your project or within any component folder. With these folders, you can structure your entire test planning effort to your personal needs or to the needs of your testing department, because the folders can either represent a team, a component, a project, some specific time span, whatever you can think of. And on this folder level, you also get a detailed overview of all the sessions and artifacts you created within the folder. But we will get into detail on that during the live presentation. Within those folders, you can create sessions, and the sessions are essentially the time boxes where you do your planning in. So a session always has a start and an end date, and there are some participants assigned to those sessions, so that means people that work within the sessions. They are the tasks, and this artifact essentially holds all the information you need to be able to work and to deliver what you planned. Within those sessions, you have tasks. So tasks is, from a tester perspective, the most granular information he gets, and the task essentially describes what the tester is supposed, or what the person you assigned the task to is supposed to work on. Then we also have milestones, which most of you might know. That's typical from project management. Milestones, that's just a certain point in time where you have to deliver something, do a review, send a report out, whatever. So I think there's not much information needed on that object. Maybe one thing to mention, milestones are not specifically bound to any session. You can create them anywhere within a test planning folder. So they essentially live on the same hierarchy level as a session does, for the sake of making them more flexible and not binding them to a specific session, because you might want to reuse them within the next session, for example. Then we have the session participants, or I mostly refer them to as users. These are the people, the persons that are supposed to deliver anything within a specific session. This can either be Tosca users or some random users with some random name that you just invite to those sessions. And last but not least, that's now the final object. That's a view folder, and a view folder is some kind of test planning folder with special capabilities. So the basic idea is that with those view folders, you can arrange sessions and milestones to your personal needs and create your personalized view. What that means in detail, we will see during the live presentation. So that's now a short overview of what I just explained. So when you read it from the left to the right, we start with a test planning root folder. on the same hierarchy level, we have either those view folders or the milestones. The root folder consists out of folders and subfolders. Within those folders, you have the sessions. Within those sessions, you have users, and the users, they have tasks. So I think from an object perspective, that's pretty simple. And by keeping it that simple, we are able to serve all your needs, essentially. When we have a detailed look at those view folders, because they are a little bit more special, because they have a different workflow to them. Those view folders, they live within the test planning root folder. And the view folders, you can either link folders, so that means either the entire root folder of your test planning session or subfolders, sessions or milestones too. So these are the artifacts that you essentially can link to those view folders. And that was the boring part. Now the action starts. So what I would like to do is I will directly jump into the Tosca test suite. And what I've prepared here, that's essentially we are essentially now in the test planning component. So when we look at our project root, there's always this test planning root folder. For the sake of simplicity, I just imported a subset where I already prepared some sessions and users and view folders and everything. So that's currently the view that we are on. So what we can see here is when you first create a test planning folder, you can name the folder and call it like project A. And you will see on the details tab of the folder that you can immediately create a session. What happened now is a little bit of magic, and there were a lot of things running in the background, and I would like to go into the details of that. We just created a session, and the session always has an owner. The session owner, per default, is always the person who is currently logged into that workspace. In my case, you can see it on the right-hand side of the Tosca commander. I'm logged in as admin, so that's the reason why the admin is currently set as the session owner. I've mentioned before that a session is a time box. So the session also has a start and an end date. The session has and that start and end date can be defined by you, obviously. It's by date and time. The session has a task duration and a status. These two fields can't be set by you. These are automatically set. The state of the session is always calculated by the tasks that are defined within the session. So when you create a new session, the session is always in the state of planned. As soon as the first task within your session is set to in progress, the entire session is in progress. And as soon as all tasks you have defined within your session are in the state of completed, the entire session is set to completed. The task duration itself, it calculates by the duration the testers or the session participants enter into the specific tasks. So if like I work for 10 minutes and another colleague works for 10 minutes, then it will sum up here for 20 minutes. That's just to give the responsible person, the session owner, an overview of how much time we already spent in that session. Underneath this detail information, we can find a progress bar that indicates how many tasks have already been done. We have a list of the session participants where you can also add additional participants. So how does that work? As soon as I hit the add button, a new session participant is invited. And when I now start typing, like a P, then we automatically in the background check all the users that are defined within your workspace, within your repository. And so you can easily invite like Peter. And now Peter is also a session participant within the test planning session for project A. Here we do see a list of tasks. Since I have not created a task yet, this list is simply empty. The session itself also has a session description. So you can like, this description, write in text there, enter some hyperlinks, do some bold text, make the text color in red, and you can play around whatever you want to, and just define a description for that specific session so that the people that you invite to the session get an idea what the session is all about and what they might want to, or what you want them to focus on, for example. And on the level of the session, you also have the possibility to add attachments. These can either be Tosca artifacts, so you can take, like, if I would have a requirement set in my workspace, you can take either the Tosca artifact and assign it to that session, or you can even take like a file from the file system and just embed it to that session. And by a simple double click, you either open up the attachment or you directly jump to the object. Let me think if there is anything else I would like to tell you about the session. There's one more detail. The session owner always needs to be a session participant. So I am now, the default session owner was the admin, since the admin user created the session. Since now I added Peter as a session participant, I could also switch the responsibility of that session to Peter in this case. If I want to create a specific task for that user, Peter, I just select Peter, click on Create Test Planning Task, and what happened now is we created a task. I can give the task a name. It's like Peter's first task. And the task is automatically set to the state of planned. It's assigned to Peter. We will get into the details what the assignment means in just a couple of minutes. And the priority is set to medium by default. What we can do now is we can go to the person Peter, where he will see all the tasks that are assigned to himself. So Peter's first task is essentially a sub-object of the person Peter. What you can do is you can also, like, please create test cases for the attached requirements, and also on the task level as well as on the user level, you are able to set user descriptions and user attachments, as well as task description and task attachments. So on each of these hierarchy levels, which means on a session, on the user, and on a task, you have the possibility to add a description and add attachments. For the simple reason, let's think of, you have an SAP testing session, and Peter is the only participant within the session, and you want him to use the same login credentials for your SAP environment for all the tasks. Then it would just define on a user level and say in the user description, hey Peter, please use user 1, password 1. And then he would know that for all the tasks he's supposed to use these credentials. But you can also think of, for each and every task, which might represent execution list or test case, you want him to use different credentials. Then you could also on a task level define, for this task I want him to use user 1 and password 1, but for the second task I want him to use user 2 and passwords 2, for example. So that gives you the flexibility to define on each of these hierarchy levels specific information to either the task, the user itself, or to the entire session. So on the user level, the user itself also has a status, and the same rule as to the session applies to the user. So the task duration and the status is calculated by the underlying tasks. So if let's assume I'm Peter, which is by the way the case, I'm Peter, and I now see that my test manager assigned me my first task, and I'm now supposed to work on it. What I would do is I would set the state to in progress to indicate the test manager that I now started working on that. And how would the test manager see it? In the first hand, he would see on my user that my state is in progress. The icon we can see here on the admin indicates that the tester is in the state completed. This indicates that the state is in progress, and when the entire circle or donut is filled in blue, that means that the tester has finished all the tasks that are assigned to him. So the test manager can see the state either in this overview of the users or on the task itself. Now I ran the test case and everything's done. I can tell my test manager that this took me like 2 hours and let's say 10 minutes. Oh, I'm on the wrong task, I'm sorry. It's like 2 hours and 10 minutes. And we are completed. Just have to remove this here. And when we now go back to the user level, we can see that it changed the state of the user, and it indicates that I worked for 2 hours and 10 minutes already on this first task, which is completed. The same information is also propagated to the up to the session, so that also on the session level I see that the session is in progress. This task has been completed, and the duration is for the entire session is 2 hours and 10 minutes. The admin still didn't start any work, which is obvious because he has no tasks assigned. And Peter is still in a state of in progress because he still has one task that he has to complete. So just for sake of completeness, I will also add a task to the admin so that we can see the icon, how it looks like as soon as all the tasks for a specific user are completed. And if we now go back to the second task for me, that was, let's say, a review of a specific test case. It only took me 10 minutes, and I immediately can set it to completed. What happened now to the session is Peter worked for 2 hours and 20 minutes, so the duration of the session is on 2 hours and 20 minutes. And since all tasks within the session are completed, the entire session is on the state completed. Just to give you an overview how that could look like when you did all your planning and invited the people and created the tasks, I already pre-created a couple of tasks and sessions. Just move that on here. So when you go to a folder, you always get this list overview of all your sessions and tasks, and also users. Sessions and tasks and milestones. So that means that you see all your planned sessions, tasks, and milestones in terms of when is their start date, when's the end date, who's the owner, which means who's responsible for that certain artifact, and what's the current state. But you not only get this list overview, you also have on the top this schedule tab. And as soon as you hit the schedule tab, you can see all the details on a time scale. So each of these bars represent a session, and each of these diamond icons, including the line, represent a specific milestone. And as soon as you hover over it, you're presented with a couple of details. And by a simple double click, you can either jump to the session or the milestone, to get all the details. You also have the possibility to zoom in and only see specific times that you're interested in, and that's actually it. There is one thing I would like to highlight. It's the view folders. How do you create them? On a test planning folder, you can just do a right click and say create test planning view folder. And that's nothing else than, let's think of it as a folder that allows you to drag and drop artifacts in there, and those artifacts are linked to the original object. That means you can either take entire folders and just drag and drop them into that view folder, but you can also take sessions as well as milestones and drop them in there. And then you are presented with all the information. You can't change those objects here by this little, it's pretty hard to see, but with those little arrow icons, you see that that's not the original object rather than a link to the original object, and by a double click you can jump to the object. What's the benefit, or when would I suggest to use those folders? Let's think of, you have a structure within your repository like we have it here, where team A and team B have their own test planning component, and the test managers for those teams, they do their planning in there. You, as the head of test managers within your company, you're not interested in a view, in a schedule view or this list view of your teams rather than your products, because you want to tell your CEO, we are ready to release our new SAP product, let's say. So that would mean that you would have to go to team A, search for the SAP session, see if it's done, then go to team B and search for the SAP session and see if it's done there, which might be a pain in the ass. So what I would recommend in this case, I would take the SAP session, I would take the milestone that refers to this SAP session from team A, and same from team B, and just take those 4 artifacts, drop it into a view folder, and say that's my release SAP view. You can also rearrange them here if you want to, for example, and then you always get an overview of what's the state of my SAP release. So that's just another possibility to make it more convenient for you to create your own view on those test planning artifacts. Right in the beginning of the live demo, I told you that there is something special about the assignee. What did I mean by that? On top of the test planning component, we thought about how should a tester find out what he's supposed to do, or where on which items he's supposed to work on. Because when you extensively use the test planning component, it might be pretty hard to find the tasks or the sessions that are assigned to you. So when you start up the Tosca Commander, in the ribbon you find an icon that's called My Area. You can also find it on the right-hand side in this little bar. When you hover over it, it like pops out. And I'll just dock it for a second so that it's easier to work with. What it essentially does is it presents you with all the sessions and tasks that are assigned to the user with which you are currently logged into the repository. In my case, it's the admin. So if I would now create a new session, which I call my admin session, and within that session, I'm automatically added as a user. So I will create my admin task, which is now also assigned to me. And as soon as I close and open the session again, I see that there is now a session that's called my admin session, where I'm assigned to because I'm the owner of the session, and I can also see the task. And the convenient thing about it is that you can, by a simple double click, directly jump to that task and see all the bits and pieces and all the details that the test manager entered there for you. And it also allows you to do basic operations, like you can also set the state of a task or the time spent on the task within this handy little component, as well as the priority. So just to show you how that works and that you believe me that that only shows your tasks, I'm now logged in as admin. I will just quickly save the workspace and open it up again. And this time I will log in as Peter. And if I go now to the user area of Peter, I can only see tasks that are assigned to Peter. And same applies here. As soon as I click on that object in the My area, it directly jumps to the original object. Besides the tasks and sessions and milestones that I'm assigned to that are presented within this test planning component, we also included the bookmarks there, which allows you to essentially take any object within Tosca and create your own bookmarks. Because you might think of, you have like a super deep structure within the execution area, for example, but you only have to always execute the same execution list. You would just take this one execution list, drag it in there as a bookmark, and you can easily jump to that execution list and run it. There is way more planned for this My area, so stay tuned for the next releases. There might be some updates to that, but I think that's super handy, and that will definitely help you find the bits and pieces you have to work on, and that you as a tester or you as a person who is supposed to participate in such a session will definitely help you to find the things you have to work on. Having said this, I think I'm done with the live demonstration, and we will just quickly jump back to our slides.
Okay, so it's our question time. We have some questions coming in. Let's start with the first. I totally love that functionality. Well, thank you. I was wondering if there is an integration with Jira planned.
That's a good question. I got that question pretty often already. We are currently working on some integration with our partner TaskTop. So for now, sadly no, but there's something that will come up in the near future. We're working on it, yes, because we know that this would deliver a lot of benefit to our customers, as you already have your user stories and your epics and your releases and release dates and everything within Jira. So it would make totally sense to sync all this information into Tosca and do your planning in there. Yes.
Okay, so stay tuned for updates. The second question that we have coming in is it possible to rerun an entire section?
By rerun, I think you might refer to a functionality that we have within exploratory testing, where by a simple right-click you can like reset the entire session and just reschedule it. I think it might be tricky within test planning, as you would have to reset the status of the task as well. But to some extent it's possible, yes, because all you would have to do is like to set the new start and end date of the session and just reset the status of the tasks. So I would say to some extent yes, and in this case I would suggest to copy paste the session itself for the simple reason that you do not lose the results. Yeah.
So we move to question number 3. What happens when the task assigned to a specific user, when I delete the user? Are they lost? Or?
Yeah. As we've seen in my introduction, there is this hierarchy level. We have also seen it in the Tosca Commander in the tree view, so that the topmost item is the folder. Underneath the folder we have the sessions or subfolders, and under the session we have the user and task. So as soon as you delete a user, not only the user will be deleted, but also the tasks that are underneath that user. And same applies to the session and to the folder. So as soon as you delete a folder, not only the folder will be deleted, but also the sessions, users, and tasks that are underneath this specific folder. So yes, they will also be deleted. But you could beforehand, let's say a user leaves your company or is on sick leave and can't participate and execute the tasks you assigned to him, I would recommend simply inviting some additional user or just and assigning the tasks to this user, or just reassign the tasks via this little drop down to a different user and then delete the user.
So we could say that as best practice, we could have that a specific task should have at least a backup user, so that to avoid losing. Okay. Another question. From which Tosca version is this feature available?
We introduced this feature with, I think it was Tosca 11.0, which was our last release last year. So it's already in there for like half a year, I would say. And we constantly receive super feedback from our customers, and we are constantly enhancing the functionalities and capabilities of our test planning component.
Okay, we are finished with the questions. So I wanted just to make everybody aware of the next Mooc that would be on the 18th of July. We will cover Tosca Connect and the new Jira integration. So stay up for updates and join us in the next Mooc. Also remember that you can contact us through different channels. You can contact the support, and the training team. You can see our knowledge base on our website. Obviously, there is always the online manual available. And as mentioned at the beginning, you can you can view the previous Mooc recordings on our website as well, and on our YouTube channel. Thank you very much.